Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Propagandacast Lehr with me, your host, Imperial Dane. The topic of today, the StuG 3 Ausführung E or Model E assault gun. Nicely improved here with the Elper Day update, having gone from being, well, virtually not really much worth the resources to being something noticeably better. It's taken a bit of a cost increase, but overall it's cheaper than a StuG. In fact, it doesn't cost an awful lot of manpower. Most of the cost is, in fact, in the fuel department. But overall, it's actually worth it. It's got, in fact, the same sort of durability as the StuG, same armor, same health. The difference, though, lies essentially in the gun, and of course, a slightly cheaper cost, and also the fact it's 6 command points. So, well, usually you can actually get it out at a reasonable pace if you sort of know what you're doing. And of course, you might be asking, well, why should I get the StuG 3? Because the StuG 3 is pretty damn solid at dealing with enemy infantry. In fact, if your opponent has pushed too much into infantry or light vehicles and isn't thus prepared for StuG 3, it can actually end up causing quite a bit of harm to your opponent, as it packs quite a punch against infantry. It's not going to cause a full squad wipe, for example, upon your opponent's infantry. On the other hand, it could generally cause a bit of harm and usually quickly drain out a squad, since it does also possess a nice rapid rate of fire. Against armor, it's not really that effective. It has a chance of penetrating, but overall you need to get close to sort of deal with any medium armor. In that case, you're generally also running into a lot of problems. So overall, it's not going to be that much help, though. Of course, you can always use the target weak point to provide a bit of support, but overall, it's not going to be your primary asset for dealing with enemy armor. At most, a bit of support, a bit of help. But your primary thought with the StuG 3 should always be dealing with light infantry, support weapons, and, you know, lighter vehicles like, say, an enemy scout car, a half-track, maybe a T-70 if you're handling things correctly, but at the same time a T-70 can actually give your StuG 3 quite a bit of a headache if you're not careful, since if it's outmaneuvered, your StuG 3 is pretty much in dire straits. But at the same time, again, a very solid, very powerful anti-infantry weapon, and also very hard for your opponent's infantry to deal with if you know what you're doing, since any head-on assault, for example, will result in heavy casualties. Overall, you want to use it like any other assault gun, which is you generally want it to support other units. Infantry pushing forward, just StuG 3 providing fire support. In this case, for example, also supporting the defense. Infantry here getting blasted by the StuG, suffering heavy casualties already there. One squad down to half, decimated by the might of the Sturmgeschütz. There we go again. Further losses, further casualties, further tears. And that really is the might of the StuG 3, the ability to really just harm your opponent's infantry and even cause light vehicles to shirk away in fear. It won't do much against a field gun or an anti-tank gun if you hit a tank gun on. If you flank sort of perhaps with some other things, you might even have a chance of clearing it out, though. But still, again, primary purpose, killing infantry. Anti-tank support it can also pull off, and again, in general, you don't want to rush it in like a tank. You don't want it blindly sort of charging in, because due to the fact it lacks turret, it will be extremely vulnerable if you send it in on its own. Again, it's generally there for supporting other units, other troops in different positions. And for example, against an SU-76, unless you actually manage to catch it off guard and, you know, flank it using this initially, I mean, you won't stand much of a chance and you will lose the StuG 3E. But again, versus infantry, it can and will cause your opponent quite a bit of harm. Veterancy bonuses only help with that. At Veterancy 2, it gains an armor bonus just like the StuG 3G. It also gains a higher rate of fire. And of course, at Veterancy 3, an even higher rate of fire. And of course, more mobility, which really means at Veterancy 3, it will absolutely eat up your opponent's infantry without even blinking. Though again, noting of course also with the fuel cost, you want to sort of get it in and actually do some damage. You want to sort of harm your opponent's infantry, because otherwise, I mean, again, that 75 fuel can actually end up hurting you if you don't put it to good use. Since it's noticeably a bit of a cost, and for example, your opponent then goes for T-34s, and you haven't really managed to make a good, you know, punch towards your opponent with the StuG 3, you will find yourself in a bit of trouble. And of course, you have to be careful. Of course, you want to sort of cover flanks right here. Of course, my opponent was able to keep on it. He, interesting enough, did not seem to have any anti-tank grenades, otherwise he should have popped that as soon as possible, because again, you know, that would be one of its big weaknesses, the mobility, and of course once it's less mobile, of course it'd be even easier for tanks to outmaneuver even infantry. And of course it also becomes an easier target for enemy assault guns, tank destroyers and field guns. So again, as a rule, if possible, always keep something in front of it, and always have it supporting something else. You can occasionally, have it, soak up the damage from bullets and all that, because they'll just shrug it off. But generally, you want to be a bit careful, since again, it can't really resist that much damage, and you can easily risk losing it. At which point, you're probably going to get a bit sad, because you lost your brand new StuG 3E. But overall, a very suitable anti-infantry Punisher. And you might then go, well, why should they, for example, choose this on Ostwind, which can also do it, and it's doctrinal? Well, the Ostwind is slightly more expensive, which is one thing. Of course, it also serves as anti-aircraft purpose. But at the same time, it doesn't quite have the same range as the StuG. It doesn't quite have the same veterancy abilities, and again, whereas the StuG can actually serve as a bit of anti-tank support, the Ostwind really can't. Also, unlike the StuG 3G, it doesn't actually have access to the penta-mounted machine gun. So that's really, of course, you can always combine them, in fact, for some slightly more advanced tactics. And in that case, I'll just refer to the usual, or the, well, official tactics the Germans used, although that with the StuG 42 and the StuG, but still, I would imagine that's applicable as well. For example, in infantry combined force with armor, you'd use the StuG to deal with the armor first, and then have the StuG, well, basically shoot away at the infantry. And overall, they're not necessarily a bad thing to combine. That is, you have the StuG dealing with enemy armor, of course helping support with the infantry, and the StuG primarily just dealing with infantry, maybe firing off a target weak point here and there to aid the StuGs as well in their duty. So I mean, that's also of course something you can do, of course, combining the two different StuGs for sort of mixed fire group, if you will. The one that will be eminently suited for actually punishing infantry, and to a certain extent also armor. But again, note the StuG will not do you frightfully well versus enemy armor. Even with a target weak point, you'll have a limited effect, and overall in that department, it is really just for support. And of course, it is very vulnerable to getting outmaneuvered and driven around with. So again, don't charge it in like a tank. Don't send it in blindly. That's really one thing that can easily get dangerous. And of course, there you go, veteran 2. Which of course also granted a high rate of fire, and of course there we go, 22 kills already. It's only been in a few games again. I mean, as an opponent, one thing you actually want to be careful with, of course, is running around out in the open, because the StuG 3E is also very good at basically blasting infantry to bits that moves out in the open. It is very good at punishing an opponent who is not very good at using cover. So that is also something you have to be very careful about. If you actually know there's a StuG on the field, you have to be very careful around infantry nearby, otherwise you will end up in tears, because again it will punish your infantry and he will punish it harshly. So again, something very important to use. Remember, use cover, use tanks, use assault guns, field guns, whatever. Just be careful in using infantry, and again, don't be careful about running around in the open. Things you can use, for example, is smoke to sort of limit its range and effect, for example. So I think that sort of largely covers it up with the StuG 3E. Much more useful than it was before the patch. Quite powerful now, quite valuable, though again, if you actually see your opponent going forward, you also know he'll be a bit more vulnerable to armor. Although, of course, he might have anti-tank and other things to support it. At the same time, it will be a bit of a sort of weak point in some departments, depending on how your opponent plays. And again, remember, above all, it's not a tank. Anyways, I hope you learned from this. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, subscribe, tell your friends, share with everyone. This is Imperial Dane saying cheers, and make good use of your StuG.